Hello, brothers and sisters in YouTube family. Hope you guys are being blessed. This morning, I found myself called to prayer by Mother Claire, as a word from Lana Voster came out that the enemy had been attacking daughters of God and taking their swords. However, the Lord is bringing deliverance. So Mother Claire called me, and formerly Miss Jane, now Mother Elizabeth, as she's taken her Franciscan vows, to stand with her as we did the binding prayer over her in this community. It was a wonderful time, as I felt deliverance truly taking place with us three ladies standing in agreement and praying over the daughters of God and our nation. However, when I left to go back to my own prayer time, I was struggling to stay up. I felt so sleepy. I even felt tempted to lie on the ground and rest a little, as I was before Mother's tree, far away from the chapel. I just kept asking the Lord to please help me and bless Mother to give me the strength and energy to pray as I should. I thought this must be a counterattack on the prayers we just prayed. But I did stay up pretty late the night before. And the Lord reminded me to not stay out in the sun because it can make me very lethargic. I just get cold easily and love leaving the chapel in the morning and going to the top of the mountain to pray, where many times it is the hottest. So as I began with my worship, the Lord played a song from the Prince of Egypt soundtrack. So I decided instead of leaving to endure as I began to worship. Holy Spirit played a song from the Prince of Egypt soundtrack, and immediately I began to envision a young prince who had everything at his beck and call, as a story unfolded before my eyes. He was in the early days of his youth, around 10 years old or so. His throne was positioned right next to his father's, as he had a vast kingdom that was far and wide, all at his inheritance. However, he had such a heart for his people, and he longed to know them and even play with the neighborhood kids. So one day, he accompanied his father into town as he was summoned to provide counsel to the people of the land. As the king was busy, the young prince snuck off so cunningly, even the guards didn't notice, as he took off his royal robe and his crown, placing them in sacks that were on the horses. He then entered a small poor village where a group of children were playing. He asked to join them. They knew he didn't look familiar, like any of the young boys in their village, but they merely agreed and accepted him. There was a group of 3 boys and 1 young girl, fairly the same age as the prince. As they tossed a ball back and forth to each other, laughing gaily and chasing one another. A little while later, the royal horses and guards entered the village as they were calling out for the prince. They then entered the area the children were playing as the king spotted the prince and gently asked the prince what he was doing and what had become of his attire and crown. The children and townspeople were in shock as they all stared in awe, then bowed down before the king and the prince. The prince then shyly told his father that he had found some new friends whom he loved and just wanted to play as he walked towards the royal guards. The children who he was playing with were still kneeling with their faces to the ground, in shock and excitement that they were playing with the prince. The young girl took one glance up as the young prince took one glance back at his group of friends as their eyes met. He smiled at her warmly, and she immediately felt flustered and a pang in her heart she had never experienced before, as did he. The young prince then mounted his royal horse as he was given his royal robe and crown to wear as they headed back to the palace. From that point on, this young maiden could not get the prince out of her mind, as she now always thought of him in her heart, even as she did the chores of the house she served at. The young prince could neither get this young maiden out of his mind, as he walked around with love in his heart for her and love of the people. As the years went by, the young prince continued to sneak off to meet these newfound friends and this newfound love that never left. As the young maiden grew into a beautiful young lady whose heart was set on the prince, but knew there couldn't be any way they could ever be together, for she was a slave girl and he was a prince. However, that didn't deter the prince, as he professed his love to her over and over again. Many times when they met, she would continue to run from him at times because of the shame she felt at her unworthiness to have the love of the prince. The king, although regal, stout, and firm, loved his son dearly. He couldn't help but notice that this young man was never the same since that visit to the poor village, as he began to notice his son slip away for long periods of time and seem to have his head in the clouds. He knew his son was in love, but with whom he didn't know. So he had the guards follow his son at a distance, as they were surprised to see him enter the poorest of the villages in the kingdom to meet this beautiful handmaiden who was a slave. At first the guards were in shock, then a little perturbed that the prince would be courting such a girl. However, as they witnessed the profound love and purity between them, through their many visits, the guards themselves were brought to tears. As they went back telling the king, in all excitement, that the prince was in love and had found beautiful handmaiden, although a slave, the love between them was indescribable, as their hearts were moved by their interactions. The king pondered this for a while, thinking, how could he give his kingdom to his son, and a queen who is a slave? But he loved his son dearly more than the kingdom, so he decided to talk with his son. Around the same time, the young handmaiden was having so many doubts, as she thought to run away for good from the village. Her love for the prince had grown so much that she couldn't bear seeing him with a queen. She knew she didn't have the wisdom, she didn't have the right attire, and she didn't have the right status to be a queen. It would never happen. She was even a slave and owned by her master. She then began to pack her things and made the decision to leave that night without saying goodbye. The son, too, at that moment had finally mustered up the courage to tell his father about his love for the handmaiden and his desire to live among the people. As the king at the moment summoned him in his courts, he told his son that he knew something was amiss, as his mind had seen on other things, and he knew when he saw a young man in love. He told him of how the guards had followed him to the poorest of the villages and found him enwrapped with a beautiful slave girl there. Immediately, the son, ready to defend this love, boldly said to his father that indeed he was in love with this young slave girl, since they met years ago in their youth, that she had captured his heart in all purity. She was everything he ever desired, and was willing to renounce his crown, the kingdom, and his inheritance just to be with the one he loved, and live among the people he loved. The father was in awe at his son's courage, and deeply moved by his son's heartfelt love for this slave girl and the people of the kingdom, that he would be willing to renounce everything just to be with them. The king was so moved, as he teared up and told his son that he wanted to raise a king who would be willing to lay down his life for the people of the kingdom. As his son had now grown up to a mature, wise, and gentle young man full of authority, the king gave him his blessing and told him to bring this young lady before him. The son in excitement ran from his father's presence to seek his beloved handmaiden to ask her for her marriage. However, when he arrived at the village, no one knew her whereabouts. He went to her master first and bought the young maiden back from him, so she was no longer a slave. He then began to search high and low, calling out her name. He finally found her in a small enclosed garden, as she was crying among the lilies, with her bags packed and her countenance deeply troubled. The prince rushed her aside for the first time in his royal garments and lifted her head up tenderly as he wiped the tears from her cheeks and said he would store every tear from this point on in an alabaster jar, because her tears were liquid words of love that were so precious to him. She was so elated to see him as she jumped to her feet, and they embraced. As thoughts of doubt, shame, and discouragement flooded her all over again, she pulled away slowly, picked up her bag, and was resolute in leaving him still, as she told him it could never be, they can never be, that she was a slave and he royalty. The prince, soon to be king, what would he want with the likes of her? Then the prince told her how much he loved her, and that he had bought her for a price, so now she was free. He had also spoken to his father, that he was willing to renounce everything for love of her and the people, that he was willing to lay down his crown, his inheritance, even the kingdom, just to be with her and live among the people with her. She was amazed and unsure of his words. As the prince continued to say that he told his father all of these things, and to his delight, his father didn't refute his request, but gave him his blessing for them to be together, that the king wanted to meet her, and that they could get married at once. She almost fainted in amazement at his words, as he gently held her up, as she said, "Would you be willing to renounce all of that for me?" The prince replied, "Yes, I would do that and so much more, just to have you by my side, because you're worth it all." Just then, the royal guard showed up to take them both back to the palace. As they entered the king's courts and kneeled before him, he stood the young maiden up, put a robe of beautiful gold lace upon her back, and a beautiful ruby ring on her finger, and the most beautiful pearl shoes on her feet, and declared her the royal princess of the kingdom, as they began to plan their wedding. As I realized that Jesus was the prince, and I, and all his brides, the young slave girl. And Jesus began, "You have written out our love story beautifully, beloved. Truly, you have, and will always be my beautiful handmaiden, whom I will never stop pursuing or loving. Indeed, you are worth it all. My beloved brides, many of you respond like the Shulamite woman to my advances. You look so much at your unworthiness, at your worthlessness, at your lack, and you attribute my love for you by what you do, or what you look like. But might I say, my love for you has no bounds. It is not moved by what you can do for me, or what you have done, but is by what I've done to have you by my side. Yes, I had my throne, all of heaven, the kingdom on earth, and in heaven at my dispense. But when I looked down on you poor weak ones, I had to have you by my side. Heaven loses its luster without you there by my side. Though you may be weak, and were wretched and enslaved, I came to set you free. I came to have you cleaned up in my blood, robed in my righteousness, and adorned with my virtue. With one glance of your love my way, my heart fluttered. Even in childhood, you can't imagine the indescribable joy you brought me with your childlike faith and your childlike wonder. Even then I was smitten by you, dirty diapers and all. As I watched you grow, I too grew in anticipation at the moment your heart would beat for me alone. As I shuddered with such longing for you, as you mused over thoughts of heaven and what it would be like, and what truly I am like. As I remembered the day I told my father that I would lay my life down for you and all of mankind, laying down my divinity to take the form of a man so I could relate to you, understand you, help you, redeem you, and have you as my bride forever. I did it all just so that I could have your love. The day I came to you to tell you of this great love I had for you, you too had your bags packed, filled with your worries, fears, shame, guilt, and attachment of things you were struggling to let go of, as you were headed out on the broad road which led to death, unsure of my words, and unsure of how a God who has made himself man could love someone like you, a slave to the world and everything in it. But I saw a masterpiece, a precious gem that had been bound by lies and coated with a thick layer of shame that weighed you down heavily. Underneath all of that, I knew you resembled me exceptionally, as you said yes to my advances. My life changed forever. Yes, you changed your Savior's heart by restoring a piece of me that had always been missing, a place that had always been empty. A vacant spot only you could fill was now complete. I love you to distraction, my beloved handmaiden, as I will one day very soon walk you down the courts of heaven and present you to my Father, that indeed I know this one, indeed she is mine, the love of my life, the joy of my heart, and my reward to the cross. Yes, beloved one, You are worth it all.
To see if the vines were in bloom, if the pomegranates had blossomed. Before I knew it, my heart had made me the blessed one of my kinswoman.